The subject today is grace is not a paycheck. Grace is given to you as a gift. It's a simple concept to understand, actually, but it's a concept that we find hard to embrace. We really choke on the fact that God says that He declares sinners right with Him by grace, not by the good works they bring. Paul highlights this in Romans chapter 4, verses 1 to 8. It's hard for us to receive a gift without trying to pay for it. And we're constantly trying to bring God some kind of shiny object of proof of our love for Him. When someone works, payment is not a gift, it's owed. And the simple fact of the matter is that God will never be in debt to you. So there's nothing that you can give Him. There's nothing that you can work out for Him. Everything you have is given to you as a gift. The sinner who comes to God for salvation does not come as someone who has met God's standard. Why? Because he doesn't have a standard. Not one that God respects anyway. The sinner comes as one who has failed to meet it. He comes as an ungodly sinner, relying on divine mercy. Because divine mercy is all we've got, folks. It's all we have. Abraham and David stand as the two great figures in Israel's history. And yet, when Paul speaks about justification, he uses both men to show the same truth. A person is made right with God by faith, not by works. Abraham was not justified because he earned righteousness through obedience. Now just think about that a minute. Abraham was not justified or made right with God because he earned righteousness through his obedience. If that had been the case, he would have had something to boast about. But you see, no one can boast before God. Abraham believed God's promise, and that's what made him righteous. And God put righteousness into his account. Simple as that. Abraham believed God's promise, and God transferred righteousness into his account. That is important because Abraham's justification, or in other words, being made right with God, came actually before the law even, and before circumcision. So he had no rules to keep. There was no law in place. That came about 400 years later. His right standing with God was not built on religious achievement, or it was not based on personal merit or outward signs. It rested entirely on faith in God's promises. Abraham was first justified by faith, it says, when he believed God, and later, his works showed that his faith was real. Justification, for that matter, being made right with God, is grace. It's not a paycheck at all. That is the wonder of the gospel. God justifies the ungodly through faith, not through works. Paul also brings up David's story. King David. David, who was considered a friend of God, someone whose heart was after God. And what the scripture reveals is that David knew sin, yet he also knew the blessings of forgiveness. Forgiveness he sorely needed, because even though David is labeled as someone after God's own heart, he committed murder, he committed adultery, and he had some real low points in his life. But he also learned about God's forgiveness, and he embraced that. Paul, when speaking of David, spoke of the person whose sins are forgiven and whose guilt is not counted against him. That blessing, which David experienced, was not earned by works. It was received by grace. So Abraham and David both teach us the same truth. Righteousness before God is not about human effort. It's about God's mercy. It's certainly not a reward for the worthy. It's a gift of grace received through faith. Thank you for listening. If you want to look at this in more depth, the links are down in the description. Have a good day.